It's time to grow up.
Hi guys, it's Robbie and Landon on Grow Up. We're here today talking about school shootings, school safety, and we have a wonderful guest, Andrew Pollack from Parkland, Florida. You know him because his daughter Meadow died, and he's just been an incredible advocate for school safety ever since. He recently wrote a book, Why Meadow Died, and that's out now, and he presents the policies and the people who are responsible for the safety and the lack of safety, I should say, of these schools and why this is happening. So we're incredibly honored to have Andrew here today, and just can't wait to dive into this with him.
Yeah, and you know, so many people do so much virtue signaling about gun safety, gun rights, gun reform, gun background checks, but there's not actual, common sense solution happening. And if you're not going to listen to conservative perspectives on it, listen to another perspective of a parent who lost a child very tragically. And in this particular case of Parkland, there was a lot of things that went wrong along the way of this happening. This was not a cut and dry case of, crazy loner school shooter, and then nobody could have prevented it, nobody could have stopped it, and it happened, and it's a tragedy, and then let's take away guns. That is not the narrative, and we're here to break that up today. Welcome to the show. Andrew, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me today.
First thing I wanted to start with, though, is I have a quote that came this morning. I'm pulling up this paper because I want it to be exact. Nancy Pelosi at her impeachment press conference today said, "I think that Trump is a coward when it comes to helping kids who are afraid of gun violence." What do you think about that statement, and how would you describe Democrats in the House in terms of their seriousness in actually fixing this problem?
Well, I've met with the president several times over the last year and a half, and the president, his administration did more for school safety than any other prior administration. He formed a federal school safety commission where they did research for over a year, where they came up with over 100 recommendations on school safety. You can look it up. I don't know the website, but there is a site that shows all the recommendations that school districts should be following. And one that was very, very important to me, one of the recommendations was they rescinded these Obama-era leniency programs that were put in place in school districts across the country of not holding kids accountable, ending the school-to-prison pipeline, lowering arrests, suspensions, expulsions. And the president and his administration, one of the people that were on that federal school commission was Secretary DeVos, and they rescinded those Obama-era leniency policies, but he didn't get any credit for it. All the Democrats did was call him racist, the president and Betsy DeVos, for ending those policies that make our schools unsafe. But the president did it. I was very proud to be a part of it. And those policies now aren't in effect, but school districts across the country are still going to participate in it because these school districts are run by people like Nancy Pelosi. These Democrats and these liberals took over our public education, even our college campuses, and they run it, and they think these policies are making our schools safer and better off for our children, but it's actually the opposite. So that's why my book, Why Meadow Died, is so important. Parents need to read it and see what happened, and then they need to take the responsibility of where they put their children. They need to put their children in private school, charter schools, home schools. They need to be responsible parents and put them in a safe environment.
We left California for one of many reasons, but these policies support this environment. What can you speak to on that issue?
Yeah, there's two policies in effect that go on in the public schools. One is the lack of discipline, where they give kids multiple chances of crimes per school year without ever getting introduced to law enforcement. In Broward, when my daughter was at the school, the murderer was allowed 4 misdemeanors. Anyone would be allowed 4 misdemeanors per school year without ever getting arrested. They could sell drugs, assault a teacher, assault another student, rob an iPhone, and never have a consequence. And these policies are going on throughout the whole country. Teachers are getting assaulted. Teachers are leaving the profession faster than ever. Kids are getting away with a lot of bullying and criminality in the schools because there's no consequence in these large school districts. And even in California, you guys left California, it's against the law to suspend disruptive children. So these type of policies are throughout the whole country, and they were forced on school districts, and parents don't know it. They were threatened with lawsuits if they didn't participate in these policies, and they were threatened they were going to have federal funding cut off. So a lot of these school districts are still have these policies in effect of not holding kids accountable, ending the school to prison pipeline. That's where it started. The other policy in effect with the public schools is they take emotionally disturbed children who are mentally ill, and they'll label them special needs. When we think of special needs, you usually think of children that have dyslexia, autism, cerebral palsy, just a learning disability, and they're not disruptive. Sure, we want to help those children. We want to mainstream them. But they take kids that are emotionally disturbed, mentally ill, and label them the same way, special needs, and give those children more rights, and they mainstream those kids who are mentally ill with our children in our schools across the country. And between those two policies, we're creating very unsafe environments in our schools across the country.
So, Andrew, why do you think it is that Democrats are so opposed to having officers or teachers who are armed at school?
Because they have an agenda. Their agenda is attack our Second Amendment. I'm a big proponent of the Second Amendment. Everyone called 911 at the school, and a lot of the officers just took a perimeter around the school and didn't go in. One was arrested for not going in the building. 4 others were fired. And people don't realize the shooter at my daughter's school reloaded 5 times inside the building. Anyone could have stopped him at any time if they were trained. But, teachers went in unarmed and got murdered. Two of the coaches that went in unarmed and got murdered. So those Democrat politicians are probably sending their kids to private school where there's armed guards.
Yep,
absolutely.
That's exactly what happens.
That's exactly where they're sending their schools. And we, being lucky enough to send our kids to private school, when we lived in California, we sent our kids to one of those schools that those politicians send their kids to and celebrities send their kids to. And let me tell you, it had the best security that you could imagine for children. Yeah. There's no way anybody was getting on the campus with a gun, and there's no way that if somebody did get on that campus with a gun that they would be able to carry out a shooting without being stopped. And it's infuriating because they really do have these 2 separate sort of systems that they believe in for themselves and then everybody else, and they don't think that poor kids in Chicago are entitled to a safe, time at school. They don't think kids in Parkland were entitled to that safety at school, but their kids are in private school. So it's infuriating from my view. I mean, what do you think?
Private schools don't take in emotionally disturbed, mentally ill children either.
That's right.
And there's consequences in private school that you're going to get expelled. Your parents are going to come and they're just going to kick you out. If you're disruptive and you're not if you're not behaving in school, they just kick you out of private school. They're not going to give you a chance. So kids know that. They go there. They don't act out. It's a good learning atmosphere for children and teachers. There hasn't been a mass shooting at a private school, and those are the reasons. They don't take these emotionally disturbed children. Kids have consequences, and a lot of them take their security
more seriously.
At the utmost. They take their security serious with single point entries and on security.
Right.
I can tell you, at private school that one of our kids went to, they had kids just talk about a gun. They talked about bringing a gun, and they were expelled right away. They didn't bring a gun. it wasn't multiple threats, it was one time, and they were kicked out of the school. And they had another sibling at the school. Didn't matter. The administration kicked that kid out. And I was surprised when I learned about it that it was that quick, but they weren't messing around.
Yeah, that sets a precedence. People don't, the murderer who killed my daughter, he threatened to shoot the school up. After he threatened to shoot the school up, he trespassed at the school and wasn't arrested still.
And how many visits did he have at his home?
They had over 40 visits to the sheriff's office to the murderer's house. Wow. And one, like if they would have arrested him the first time he trespassed, maybe he doesn't go back to the school the second time and shoot the school up because he was already arrested. Absolutely. But,
yeah, there should have been intervention, mental health, intervention. That didn't happen. Democrats are so eager to enact red flag laws while at the same time ignoring mental health red flags with our youth. So what are your views on red flag laws specifically, and how Democrats are trying to use and manipulate red flag laws?
Do you have any concerns too? I would add to that question. Any concerns about sort of depriving people of their due process rights? Because it's sort of tricky ground. On one hand, it seems very common sense to use a red flag law on somebody like the murderer who killed Meadow. It seems like common sense to do that. We should, remove this from there. How do we come up with something fair where we're making sure that we're not violating due process at the same time as making sure mentally ill people aren't getting guns?
Well, I think the red flag laws, for me, there's laws already in place, okay? Yeah. So say someone's it doesn't make sense to me, the red flags. This is why. I'll explain it to you. So that they see someone who's a danger to themselves, right, and others, right? So they want to take away their guns. But if you just take away someone's guns, how does that protect? They could just kill themselves in their garage. They could take an axe. They could drive their car into a crowd of people. Yeah. So if someone's so much of a danger, then they should be arrested. And that's the way I look at it. Or if somebody's mentally ill, where they're a danger to themselves and others, they should be involuntarily committed and evaluated by a mental health expert, and they should come to the conclusion that way. Why just take their guns away and leave them on the street where they could take an axe out of their garage and go kill people? Absolutely. So I don't understand the red flags. If someone's that much of a danger, they should be arrested or committed.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you.
I know a sheriff in Florida where the red flags, it's never just taking away someone's guns. It always has to do with an arrest. Someone's getting arrested or someone's getting committed. Yeah. So the red flags, just to take someone's guns away, I don't agree with it. It doesn't go far enough because there's other weapons they could have. So, if they're that much of a threat, they should be taken seriously.
Absolutely. And
everyone should have due process. But if you're not a threat and you're not a threat to others, then they shouldn't be taking away anyone's guns without the due process.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think that was one of the more popular questions that we got from people that are just interested, because it's sort of a tricky ground, that the red flag laws, because there's sort of, in some ways, certain parts of it sound sensible, but it becomes very clear very quickly that how it could be misused and that it doesn't go far enough, because if you're just taking somebody's guns, they, like you said, they can do anything. They could
go in the garage and get a propane bottle and blow it up, or go get an axe or a baseball bat or your car. Why aren't you taking these people's driver's license? Right. You're worried about their guns. Why aren't you taking their driver's license? Yeah. So it doesn't make sense to me. The red flags red flags alone don't make sense. It's just something to say, just like a good deed they think they're doing, these Democrats. But there's laws in place. If someone makes a threat, arrest them.
Right. What other policies would you like to see implemented, like maybe perhaps in regards to mental health, in schools? I mean, is there anything missing that we should be supporting as conservatives or, as Republicans to combat all of these counterproductive bills on the left?
The biggest thing, like I spoke about before, is they take kids that are mentally ill, okay, and emotionally disturbed, and they mainstream them and they label them special needs instead of putting them in the right program. You know, they should be in a program where they're supervised. These kids are mentally ill. Don't label them special needs because the Americans Disability Act and mainstream them with our kids. That's not right. And political correctness, they'll never say what I'm saying. You know, these kids shouldn't be mainstream. If you want to mainstream with kids with learning disabilities, sure, as long as they're not disruptive. You know, autistic, dyslexia, like I said, cerebral palsy, all those things. Yeah, let's mainstream. But they're taking kids that are mentally ill on those psychotropic drugs and mainstreaming them. And that's the biggest problem. And parents, you got to wake up to this. You got to see what's going on and take responsibility for your children. Read my book, Why Meadow Died, and do not just think you're going to put your kid in a public school and they're going to be safe. Be responsible. Look into these policies. And you know, I'd sell my kidney. I would sell my kidney to be able to put my daughter in private school if I had to. That's how important it is in that environment that you put them in. You know, so you just put them in the right environment. And public schools, they don't take this stuff serious.
Right. What about an actual, you know, we've talked about armed officers. What about mental health counselors that bear some sort of responsibility for setting the environment and the resources for kids that might be, you know, showing signs of isolation and potential for mental health issues that with a propensity for violence? What do you think about that? Is that something you think is important?
Service, a couple of the parents from Parkland just went on a tour with Secret Service. They put out how the schools could start doing threat assessments for these kids that show these signs of, you know, mental illness. You know, all of them. Everybody knows who these shooters are before they do anything. So there is help. There is threat assessments for these kids, and you know, it needs to be taken serious. And really, it boils down to the parents, like I keep saying. It's all on them. It's their responsibility where they put their children in. And if you ask your kids, hey, what's going on in school? They see these kids. They know what's going on in the schools. So parents, you know, need to be in touch with their children too, and your local school district.
And I would stress this to parents is I think part of the what happens here is apathy with parents, where there's just this idea that, oh, there's, you know, this is such a rare thing, it's not going to happen to my kid. And too many people think that way. And it's not just about school shootings. This is about, you know, violence at schools. This is about brainwashing at schools. This is about so many other areas that it's just so incredibly important to be involved in your kids' education. That's what I can't stress enough. And it's not just about public school, because there are some private schools that, you know, may be insulated from the school shooting thing, but there's other areas where they're really shifting so far left that your kid's going to come home thinking that they can change genders every day. There's just so much going on. Parents really need to be totally informed on. And I would say even in places like California, you know, our kids went to different schools, and one of our kids' private schools they went to, they actually started the last year that we attended there. We pulled him out of school from there. But the last year he attended there, they started mainstreaming kids with, you know, mental problems. And one of the kids in his class had extreme anger problems and actually stabbed our kid in the hand with a pencil. That's not normal behavior. That's not something a kid should expect to happen during school. And he had these outbursts every single day where he attacked people. And the school said, our hands are tied. The parent went to the American Disabilities Act and basically said that we were discriminating and all this stuff, and we have nothing we can do. We're fighting it, but our hands are tied right now. And there's people who, you know, they're going to wage this war their own way, and parents need to be fully aware of what's going on and do what's best for their child. Even if that means doing the hard thing and pulling your kid out of school and finding a new school, do it. You know, it's whatever's best for your child, you need to do it. And I just wanted to stress that point.
Yeah, I think
but
that's
you know what I was going to ask you about?
important.
My wife told me about something I didn't know about, that there's a program
in Jersey. Will you tell us about the Canine program in Jersey?
I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah, we trained a dog that we start him at a young age to go towards gunfire. So they start with a cap gun, with these dogs, Malinois, Dutch Shepherds, German Shepherds. It's really, you really got to put a lot of time into picking the right dog. And these dogs are trained to go towards gunfire. And it's pretty amazing, because so many humans failed my daughter that day. And these dogs won't fail. So this dog's in New Jersey patrolling down by Atlantic City and in a technical school. And these dogs are getting implemented throughout the country where they could work at schools. Some of them do gun detection work. Some of them will go towards gunfire. And the kids like it. They could relate with the dogs. They feel safe when the dog's there. And it's just something I've been working on. And I put a book out, a child's book, about Canine Meadow. And I think, security's done in different layers. The more you do, the safer the place is. So if you could have a dog, you could have armed security, you could have single point of entries, those policies of not having those type of kids in the schools. Everything adds up so you could see your kid come home safe at the end of the day. And I'm always working on improving school safety.
Where can we get that book?
Go on Amazon, Canine Meadow, and go on Amazon and look, because I'd like you to get back to me with some feedback. Let me know how your kids like it. And it's for elementary age kids. Kids are getting introduced to all these drills at school. And this is a way to open up communication with your children about school safety, about bullying, see something, say something. So it's just a nice, it's like a bedtime storybook that I wrote with a friend.
That's awesome. I love that story, and I think it's such a great tool. Why not? Why would we not want to have these incredible dogs that are highly trained, and the overall morale of the school gets boosted because kids, animals are therapeutic just inherently, but the fact that they know that this dog is looking out for them and their safety, really sets a safe precedent.
Especially because, there's some kids, especially in areas where parents, may not be as present statistically. I came from an area where there was quite a bit of, there was a lot of gang stuff going on at the high school that I went to and stuff. And I think a lot of times kids end up in this mindset thinking that adults fail them. And, to be fair to those kids, adults have failed them in a lot of ways. And I think having the animal program with those dogs is really wonderful because it's somebody that they can finally trust, that they know.
And it's a deterrent. You know what I mean? That's really what it is. There's sick kids. Most of them are cowards. They're not going to go where they know this dog. They're more scared of dogs than they are of guns. When they know this dog's going to come at them like a missile and attack them. They're not really going to go to the school. It's the same thing with having armed guards and armed teachers. If they know that's there, they're not going to go to that school. And like I said, it's all layers. The more a school could do, the better, the safer the children are and the teachers.
That's right. I mean, it seems very simple, very common sense approach. We're doing it everywhere else. We spend more resources guarding our money, our airports, than we do our children. It seems very common sense.
No, you guys are doing the right thing. You got your children in private school. So more parents, in Broward County, this fall, enrollment was down by 2,000 students. So parents are getting it. They're reading the book. They're learning about these policies, and they're starting to get it across the country. This message of what's going on in these public schools and why we're seeing so much violence.
And that's why school choice is so important. Parents need to have that choice. They need to be empowered with that choice all over the country to be able to choose. Hey, is the way they're doing this in public school, is that right for my child? Every parent should have the opportunity to say, no, it's not right for my child. I want to take that tuition money that the state has, cut out for them, and I want to take that over to this private school, this religious school, this charter school, and I want them there. That's the best for my child.
They're doing that in Florida. We have that voucher program, Governor DeSantis, and we're fortunate in Florida. The Senate, we have a supermajority run by Republicans. If it was the other way around, Democrats, they don't want charter schools. They want everyone going to public school. They don't like private schools. They support the teachers' unions who push these policies. So, it's on the parents. It's your responsibility.
Right, and piggybacking on that, the parents, it's our responsibility to raise our kids with values. What can you speak to, regarding culture, like society, social media, violent video games? How much of an impact do you think that plays into, our children? And, where's the medium for parents to get involved with that, and impart our values and our standards in raising kids?
That's a great question.
Well, I tell parents all the time, take your kids, I say it's pretty simple. Take your children for a walk, put the phones down, and go for a walk with your kids. You'll be amazed at how much they open up and talk to you. Leave the phones, even if you go for a half a mile around the block or a mile, just take your kids and just have them talk and leave the phones down. It's real important. I try and do it when I'm with my kids. Just take a walk with them and communicate. Because it's life, look at the pressures these kids have with social media. These Democrats and these kids that, it's not cool to be a conservative growing up. And they, they're protesting conservatives and it's not cool. But you know what? Keep pushing conservative values on your children. It's very important. Yeah. And I've done it. You guys are doing it. So it's real important to stay in touch and put the phones down once in a while and just chill out with your kids. Take a walk.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it has a very big impact on kids, and we're seeing like rising levels of anxiety and depression, with social media, and just a detachment from real connection and a sense of belonging. I think it has a lot to do with it.
I'd say it's a culture of death. People have gun control advocates have come at me with a million different things, and the one thing that I always come back to with them is I say, look, most of you are not aware of the history of guns, so I'm going to give you, a little bit of an education here. We've had all of the same guns, including AR-15s, for over 60 years. Okay, we didn't have this mass shooting problem 60 years ago, though. What changed in that time period? And what changed is our culture. We have a culture that celebrates death, evil, violence, everything that the left has sort of like pushed into the culture through this idea that you can just have total debauchery, and as long as it's entertaining, it's fine. As long as you say it's just for entertainment value, it's okay. But the reality seeps in, this stuff does seep into our culture, and it does affect kids. It does affect their tolerance for violence. It affects their tolerance for gore, and it affects the way that they react in anger, So there is some effect from this culture of death that I think has a major part to play in why we're seeing these mass shootings.
And then you throw into the loop that these mentally sick individuals are on these psychotropic drugs, most of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are. On the label on these psychotropic drugs, a lot of them, it says it will increase homicidal ideation. So it increases violence. A lot of these drugs, if someone's not violent, I'm sure they'll most likely never be a problem. But when you take someone like my daughter's murderer, who's punching their mother's teeth out, punching holes in the wall, and skinning animals, and then you give them psychotropic drugs, of course, just a recipe for something to happen. And a lot of these mass murderers, I know the one in Dayton, Ohio, the one recently within the last year, he killed people in Dayton. He was on them. I don't know. A lot of times it's hard. They don't want, because of the laws, they don't want to tell you about their medications that most of these people are on. But a lot of them are on these psychotropic drugs that are mentally ill.
Absolutely. The Colorado shooter, that it's actually more than not. They're on, all these psychotropic medications and combinations too, which they've done no controlled placebo studies on the combo of, Ativan and Prozac and all of this stuff.
Or on brain development.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If somebody's okay and just needs help with a learning disability, it's not going to be a problem. But when parents don't even know this, if they have a violent child and then the psychiatrist is giving them these psychotropics, they don't even know. Right. But read the label, and it says right on the label it increases homicidal ideation, and it's right on there.
Right.
Oh, it looks like we lost Andrew. Well, we're wrapping up anyways. We had those last two viewer questions. we just want to thank Andrew so much for being here today. It's incredibly insightful. Your experience is an experience that we hope no other parent has to have. But thank you so much for bringing that experience to help teach people how we can fix this. I would urge people to check out Andrew's book, Why Meadow Died. It's incredibly heartbreaking, but it's necessary, because if you want to get to the root of the problem, you need to understand the root of the problem. And he really gets down to it in the policies and the people responsible for this just mass flood of mass shootings that have occurred, you know, and really have genuinely scared kids. They have reason to be a little bit afraid from the way the media has, you know, covered this story and the way Democrats have enabled a lot of these policies. So, you know, together we can fix it. And I think Andrew showed a lot of us today what courage looks like, and showed us all that we have the courage within us to be able to go to these school boards, ask the right questions, and really push for safer schools and better policies that empower teachers, empower officers, and leave kids in the best position to grow.
Absolutely. I've learned so much from Andrew today, so thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. I think that the biggest takeaway for me personally was just reinforcing the idea of parenting. Where there's present parents, where there's a strong male role model of some kind, you know, we're going to catch these kids before they end up letting the mental health conditions take over. And it's entirely preventable. It really is. It's not difficult. And you know, Andrew's a voice of reason. It's really not that difficult. It's common sense solutions. People want to virtue signal and debate all day about ideas about guns and this and that, but they're completely missing, you know, the elephant in the room. What's right in front of our face. You know, let's talk to parents that you know, have children that are going through this, and you'll see, you know, what kind of values are being instilled at home.
Kids need us. At the end of the day, kids need us, and I think that's an overwhelming connected message that Andrew has, is that parents need to be aware of what's going on in schools. So if you have kids or thinking about having kids, you know, make sure you're involved. Make sure you know what's actually going on. Make sure you know what your school's policies are. That doesn't just go for, you know, this issue and school safety. It goes for all issues. Make sure you know what they're being taught. Schools are just so heavily, you know, push towards the left that you need to know what your kid's being taught about all of these important issues that we talk about in politics, because they've really become largely, especially public schools have, you know, private schools too, but they've really become liberal indoctrination centers. So you have to, you know, carefully sort of study what it is they're learning.
Absolutely, and just overall attitudes towards law enforcement, towards authorities, towards teachers, towards guns. We have to have these conversations, and at this point in time, it's not political. It's not. We can't afford to not have these conversations. And quite frankly, they're already having them at school. Only our children are only hearing a very different side. So we have to step up to the plate as parents. And be conscious of what they're learning, what they're being taught and indoctrinated with, and expose them to other healthy viewpoints about all of those issues above. And I want to say something too that I've noticed recently. There's a lot of modern academia, researchers, and you know, people who are in charge of cultivating school education frameworks, pushing this idea of hands-off parenting or helicopter parenting. And I want to say there's a lot of nuance there, because you know, the idea of helicopter parenting, not letting your kids make mistakes, you know, learning resiliency, all of that is great. And also, you know, not forcing your kids to be involved in 10 extracurricular activities and burning them out and putting pressure on them for school. All of those nuances of that conversation are great, but you're not a helicopter parent. You're not a controlling parent. By talking to the school, by letting them know, I'm the parent and I'm raising my child and I'm their first teacher. And I'm very grateful for your role, but we're in this together. We're going to be working together. You're not in charge of molding my child's political viewpoints, moral viewpoints. No, you're in charge of keeping education safe and teaching education as it should be taught. And I think that is not overstepping our bounds, and we're kind of being conditioned to feel like, oh, we don't want to ruffle feathers, we don't want to be the problem parent, you know, we don't want to say too much, and then other parents are going to think we, you know, have we have
it's
to
not
stand
overstepping
up.
our bounds.
It's not
actually
overstepping our bounds.
It's completely within our bounds. It's part of your job. So
it's part of our job.
Yeah.
And with our kids too. It is our job to monitor their social media. It is our job to make sure we're protecting them. It is our job to have these conversations with them that might be perceived as political, but they're already having it. So you have to, this is the culture of where we're at. We have to have these conversations, instilling our values before somebody else instills theirs through media campaigns and modern academia disguised as all of these beautiful flowery words that they like to say
progressive word selling.
Say is being taught to the kids, but the underlying message is very clear leftist ideals.
And that's sort of the basis of what we're talking about today. And I think that's one of the simplest takeaways that you can take. There's a lot of takeaways, but that's one of the simplest, most important. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you guys soon.
It's time to grow up.